Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to Reserved Investments, and thank you for joining me. Welcome to part 2 of my 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. We have a lot of ground to cover. It's late at night, so we're going to jump right into the questions. We're going to begin with Pokemon because I think that there is a lot of confusion on where I stand in regards to the Pokemon market. And I know a lot of the critics of Reserved Investments don't take the time to watch these Q&A videos. So this is something that I'm also going to probably have to rehash in another video that I'm going to be doing that's going to launch on this channel sometime soon. But make no mistake, Pokemon is in a speculative frenzy, not to be confused with the speculative bubble. So I'm going to read this question, and I'm going to go into this in depth and give you my full answer and analysis. So here's the question. Is Pokemon just another junk wax 2.0? I've lived through the 1980s, the early 1990s frenzy, where everyone thought they were going to get rich off of sports cards. People were also buying unopened boxes. I see a lot of similarities in the buyer psychology behind the junk wax boom and the Pokemon frenzy that's happening right now. So here's one of the main differences. Pokemon has organic collectability, so it's not going to go to zero. I don't understand why when I see a video and they're critiquing Reserved Investments, they keep thinking that I somehow think that Pokemon's going to go to zero. That's not what I'm saying, and that's not what I ever said on this channel. There's a very big variance between zero and not making any money at all and making a shit ton of money. You understand, those are three entirely different things. So I want to be very clear here. When I talk about Pokemon, what you got to realize is the modern era cards right now, at the recording of this video, are in a massive speculative frenzy. That frenzy is unsustainable over the long term unless the Pokemon company continues to produce less and less of the cards in each subsequent set, meaning that there's more increased demand simply because there's less supply. And what the Pokemon company is doing, they're not stupid. They're limiting the amount of cards they produce in each set, but what they're also doing is increasing the amount of products that they're releasing each year to make up for that lost revenue. So what that's done is it has created a speculator frenzy in this market where you see all these TikTok videos, all these YouTube videos, where Timmy's, Kimmies, and Poindexters are going to Costco, they're going to Walmart, they're going to Target or Sam's Club, and they're literally pushing 13 and 14-year-old kids out of the way to get these cards so they can flip them on eBay for an immediate profit. That is not sustainable over the long term. The other problem you have in this regard is if somebody, dare I say, sits there and wants to crack open an elite trainer box of prismatic evolutions that's now selling for a premium on the secondary market simply because the Pokemon company limited supply, nothing else, well, now they're putting gloves on, they're carefully handling the cards, and any card that is deemed worthy immediately gets sleeved and sent to PSA for grading, where it's guaranteed to come back a PSA 8, 9, or 10. And this is where we have a problem. Vintage Pokemon cards were opened and played with. Modern era Pokemon cards are being treated as a coveted investment. And unfortunately, it's not getting in the hands of the players. So how do you form a nostalgic attachment to something that you never handled originally? That's very hard to do. So that's why I tell you there's a lot of problems in this market. And if the Pokemon company isn't careful in how they handle this, they're going to kill the golden goose. And this is my differences with people like Rudy with Alpha Investments that think the Pokemon company is handling this perfectly. I'll tell you what you do. Go ask the parents of those kids that are trying to get cards from Prismatic Evolutions or Surging Sparks that have to pay a premium on the secondary market. If they think Nintendo and the Pokemon Company is handling this perfectly. The reason why a lot of these YouTubers say that is because they're on the investment and speculation side of this. They're not on the collectible side. If you're on the collectible side, you see this vastly different, and that is not sustainable. Every company that literally purposely limits supply of their product to increase demand gets burned in the end. Whether the item fails to become massively collectible 10, 20 years down the line, or the company gets calls and letters and emails from angry parents that can't buy the product for their kids. Now, to be fair, there is another dynamic at play here that we got to bring up before the Pokemon collectors come into the comment section and cut me up. A lot of the cards, the really hard to find, scarce cards in prismatic evolutions, are very hard to find and pull, meaning they're very low pull rates. So as a result, by nature of the fact that this is a limited product, hard to find at present time, those cards have a lot of value on the secondary market. So what a lot of Pokemon investors and speculators are thinking about, well, gee, if those particular cards are very limited in scope now, they're going to be limited in scope in the future. But you have to look at this from the perspective, this is just one set that the Pokemon Company is releasing. How many sets do they release per year? So you got to kind of look at the bigger picture. That's where I urge caution in this market. Now, let's answer the question that I get. Well, Sean, I'm sitting on 20 cases of Evolving Skies. The price just keeps going up and up. What do you say to that? Look, if you're financially established, if you're like me, if you're in your 40s, heaven forbid, some of you are in your 50s, or even if you're in your late 30s, and you have hundreds of thousands of dollars sitting in investment accounts, you have 401k with 100, 200, 300, 400 grand in it, your house is pretty much paid off, you have no student loan debt, you're not carrying a ton of credit card debt, by all means, if you want to keep $50 or $100,000 in Pokemon cards and you want to see what it does, you do you. I'm not going to criticize you. The people that I'm criticizing are the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters that tell me, diamond hands, I'm going all in on Pokemon. I'm 30 years old. I have $60,000 in Pokemon cards and virtually no other assets. If that's you, I'm sorry, you have rocks for brains. If that's you, you should be selling some of that position and putting it in assets that have underlying cash flows. This is why we talk an awful lot in this channel. If you're looking to invest in the antiques and collectibles trade, you have to understand these are different kinds of investments. These are considered alternate asset classes. If you have a collection of rare coins or comic books or traditional antiques or firearms or Pokemon cards, keep in mind that asset is not generating you any income. It is not on par with owning a well-diversified financial portfolio or an S&P 500 index fund or a piece of real estate that you're renting out each and every month and getting rental income from. You need to put this all in perspective. The type of Pokemon enthusiasts that I criticize on this channel are the Timmies, Kimmies, and Poindexters that come in the comment section and say something stupid to me, like they're building generational wealth by putting all their money in Pokemon cards. That is the dumbest thing I ever heard. You understand, all of these alternate asset classes, whether it's antiques, collectibles, Pokemon cards, rare coins, cryptocurrency, Bitcoin, gold, silver, they all rely on the greater full theory. You have to find someone else out there that is willing to pay a higher price than you when you go to sell. Right now is the optimal time to sell most modern era Pokemon cards because you're in that environment. If you wait 10 to 20 years, or heaven forbid, even 5 years, we don't know what the market's going to bear. Remember, there was a time when Pokemon cards were not in this type of frenzy. If we get in my DeLorean time machine and we go back to 2001, 2003, No one was hoarding Pokemon cards, modern era products. That's why Sky Ridge booster boxes are selling at all-time highs on the secondary market right now. Even back before Pokemon Go, Pokemon really wasn't seen as the investable card game that it is now. It belonged to Magic the Gathering. If you remember, right around 2015, 2016, everybody was going nuts because of the reserve list card buyouts that affected Magic the Gathering. Pokemon was pretty much in the toilet back then. So you have to understand this current craze, this speculative frenzy that we're in. Eventually it's going to end. That doesn't mean Pokemon's going to zero. I never once said that. What I am telling you, though, there could realistically come a time where there's a massive pullback in prices on a lot of this modern stuff. That's what I'm warning you about. If you study these markets, you would learn this. If you actually study collectible finance and actually pay attention to this channel and read the books that I recommend, this would become second nature to you. That's why there's a book right in the background called Contingencies of Value. The way that we value items in the antiques and collectibles trade is basically based on a combination of factors that apply to economics and cultural relevance. There's no underlying cash flows to apply to these asset classes. This is why, I don't know if you guys are aware of this, I am certified to write appraisals for antiques and collectibles. And if you get me to write an appraisal for you, at the bottom, it will say, this is just that, an assessment of value. An item is only worth what someone is willing to pay for it. So if you go to sell that item, and it doesn't matter if it's me or any other expert in the trade, and we value it at $1,200 and it only sells for $800, I'm sorry, an item is only worth what somebody is willing to pay for it. That's what makes these particular items so inherently risky. So now that I spent 12 minutes of this video talking about Pokemon, are there any more questions that I need to cover on this subject? Again, reserved investments never once said Pokemon is going to go to zero. Those of you that think I said that, please show me the video that I said that in. That has never come out of my words. That has never been written in any of the articles that I write for Antiques and Auction News. Next question. Sean, regarding the performance of vintage Star Wars toys in 2024, and given that Hakes started selling off the infamous Jeff Jacobs collection, where do you see this market heading short-term and long-term? Thank you for everything you do. This channel is a gem. Okay, first of all, I want to be very clear. I've never had any direct conversations with Jeff Jacobs, but I will say this. I respect the individual very much because he chose an excellent time to sell his collection. As I've said before, Star Wars toys, vintage toys, especially from the coveted late 70s, 1980s, and even early 1990s, that particular market is on fire at present time. If you have any high-grade AFA examples of these particular items, you should consider, if you're ready to, offloading these items while the market is red hot. So I have a lot of respect for Jeff Jacobs. He made a very intelligent decision, in my opinion. I don't know if he watches this channel. I couldn't tell you. I do know that he at least had enough sense that he was ready to let go, and he realized the market is red hot. I might as well sell into the frenzy. And he is profiting substantially for this because, I don't know if you're aware of this, his collection is now valued in the millions. So he stands to profit tremendously from this. Now, what does that mean for everybody else? Well, first of all, I don't think that vintage toys, mainly in particular, the blue chip toy of this era, which is Star Wars, is going to go to zero anytime soon. So this market isn't going to crash and burn. The market's probably going to do well in 2025 as well. So over the short term, I think this market still has legs to go. I'm not going to say that the market's going to return 10 to 20% over the next year, although that is a possibility. It's over the long term where you really have to think here. And it's not so much what the market's going to do. It's the risk of holding these items. As I've said in every single video I do, talking about vintage toys and action figures, these items are inherently fragile, even if they are third-party graded by AFA. These items yellow, they deteriorate, the tape dries out, even carded action figures can fall off, they can fall apart from the bubble. These items are inherently risky to hold long term. If someone like me is investing in this market, you guys know I tend to go after the proof cards. I like vintage Kenner Toys Star Wars proof cards. That's pretty much where I choose to invest in this market. Now, everybody is different. I know people that go after graded loose figures. I know people that do take the risk and go after, of course, graded, factory sealed, carded figures, and also the play sets. In my opinion, over the long term, that is inherently risky. And let me drop a really big hint here. I'm a consultant in the trade. I have had many people come to me and say, Sean, I got a problem. I spent $50,000 on vintage toys. I went to check on some of these pieces. They were stored in climate control storage, and some of the pieces are falling apart. What do I do? And I have to explain to these individuals, you just got slapped in the face with a stale donut. You're going to end up taking a loss because you can't send them back to AFA. They're going to come back in a lower grade, number one. And if you reach out to an auction house, the auction house, if they're legit, they're going to look at the item and see that it doesn't match the grade. Now, there have been some instances, and I do have to call this out, where some of these pieces in high grade that I looked at and I said, there's no way that is still qualifying as an AFA 90 or a 95 that we've talked about in this channel, did go to reputable auction houses, and the auction house just listed them in their auction without noting any other damage because they were encapsulated and graded by AFA or another third-party grading company. I think that that is completely ridiculous. There is tremendous risk in this market when compared to going after a graded comic book, a graded coin, a graded trading card, a graded piece of currency. So if you are putting money in this market, I am assuming that you have a strong emotional attachment to these items. And number two, you're willing to stomach that risk. Me, at the age of 48, I am not willing to stomach that risk. So I don't put a lot in this market personally, but I have clients who do. So that's my answer. It's not that I fear the market's going to take a downturn, which eventually it will. Let's be honest. People my age that grew up with Star Wars, some of us are in our 50s. Others of us that remember the original trilogy are quickly approaching our 50s. So at some point, a couple of decades from now, some of these pieces are going to fall in price as a lot of us start to downsize, or, I hate to say this, die off. That is what's going to happen. Gen X is getting very up there in age at present time. It's just the way it is. I mean, we often talk about baby boomers being the prominent generation. Well, they're dying off each and every day. I think the statistic is roughly 10 to 20,000 baby boomers die each and every day. I know that sounds morbid, but that's the environment that we're in. In another 10 to 20 years, it's going to be Gen Xers you're going to read about that are dying off. So it is kind of scary as you start to age and you realize the fragility of these products. So just understand, this market is going to become inherently volatile. If you can't handle that risk, this market is not for you. Or if you want to play on this market, go after the proof cards. The proof cards aren't going to deteriorate like the carded toys and factory sealed play sets are. That's one way to mitigate risk, but you got to understand, if you're going to invest in proof cards, it's a very niche market. The type of person that grew up playing with the action figures probably is not going to settle for just collecting proof cards. It's a very esoteric market. And I want to make that very clear because I think that some of you think that I'm recommending that you invest in proof cards. The only reason that I'm recommending that you invest in proof cards is if you have a passion for this market, you want to own something without the risk. One way to do that, to mitigate risk, is to go after the proof cards. So I hope that answers your question in full. Next question. Sean, love the channel. How do you feel about the graded magazine market? Oh my goodness, is this a loaded question? Okay, the graded magazine market is very niche. Yes, CGC has a lock on this market. This market pretty much spawned out of CGC grading comic books and wanting to expand into comic magazines. Now, in my opinion, there are very few, there's a couple, but there's very few comic magazines that I would ever advise you to invest in. I think one of the top tier keys that comes to mind is Vampirella 1. That's a comic book that if you wanted to build a top tier collection of horror comics and you said to me, Sean, I'm thinking about putting money into Vampirella issue number 1. What do you think? I would say go for it. That's a wise move if you're into that type of item. But overall, magazines have never really caught on. There's a couple of key magazines out there. For instance, I'll name one. If you have a first edition issue of Playboy that features Marilyn Monroe, and that's in fairly high grade, that will command a premium on the secondary market. Now, caveat here, 10, 20, 30 years out, I think that item is going to start to drop in value because let's be honest, if somebody is born in 2025, do they really care who Marilyn Monroe is? Let's just put that in perspective. If somebody is born this year in 2025, 25 years from now, they're going to be 25 years of age and it's going to be 2050. Do you think they really care who Marilyn Monroe is? So that's what I mean. You have to put this market in perspective. If you're investing in a lot of these items, you have to understand that you're on a strict timeline. Eventually, some of these items are going to fall off a cliff, much like Playboy issue 1. Now, let's talk about items in this market, the graded magazine market, that do have lags. If you happen to have a copy of Nintendo Power 1, and it's in CGC 9.2, 9.4, heaven forbid 9.6, or amazingly, there is one or two out there, 9.8 condition. You have something that I consider to be very iconic. That actually is an investment potential item because it's extremely iconic. People my age remember when the Nintendo Entertainment System came out, and we remember when we were able to send in that card to get a subscription to Nintendo Power. I remember I was in junior high school. I came home and I found that manila envelope in the mailbox waiting for me, and I ripped it open, and there was that iconic cover featuring the claymation reimagining of Super Mario Bros. 2. And every kid my age probably remembers that experience next to seeing The Wizard when Super Mario Bros. 3 debuted in movie theaters. So that's why Nintendo Power 1 is so iconic. That's why I tell you that particular item is investment worthy because it really has that pull of nostalgia that a lot of these high profile items that we all covet, like in Action Comics 1, that particular item has that same power in my opinion. So that particular piece of memorabilia is worth investing in. Now, let's talk about later issues of Nintendo Power. Are they worth getting CGC graded? The answer is hit or miss. Depends on the grade. When you start getting past the first couple of issues of Nintendo Power magazine, depending on the grade, values fall off a cliff. And you can easily research this if you look up Nintendo Power CGC, go on eBay, go on Heritage, and do a price history check for yourself to see what I mean. Even lower graded copies of Nintendo Power 1 don't really have a lot of value. You really don't hit the value peak on that book until you get past 7.5. Meaning if you have a 7.5 condition copy of Nintendo Power 1 that you're certain if you send that to CGC, it's going to come back a 7.5 or higher, you probably have a book at least worth $1,000 if you flip it on Heritage or you flip it on eBay. So this market is very limited. Another question I get asked, well, Sean, what about vintage Sports Illustrated magazines? The answer is no. The market really isn't there for those items. There may be one or two issues that are coveted by collectors and high grade. Overall, no. Graded magazines, it's just really not a thing. It's hit or miss. Another question I get asked in this market. Well, Sean, I love video games, and I have some early examples of Electronic Gaming Monthly or Game Pro, or I'm going to trigger some of you, my favorite video game magazine from that era, Video Games and Computer Entertainment. Or how about this, Die Hard Game Fan, or Electronic Games, or Next Gen, or Game Informer? The answer is, unless you have a first issue that is really in high grade, it's probably not worth grading unless you want to keep it for yourself. Meaning, if you have a collection of vintage magazines, you want to preserve them because they have value for you, you do that. But just don't expect to make a profit if you go and flip them on the secondary market. So that's how I answer this. This market is still very niche with few exceptions, and I just named those exceptions. Next question. Sean, what has happened to the contemporary art market and why? Okay, the contemporary art market has always been in flux. This market goes through predictable cycles, booms, busts, ups, downs. Right now, the reason why this market is suffering is because of the uncertainty in the overall economy. You know, back when rates were at historic lows, meaning close to 0%, it made sense for somebody with a lot of money, and we're talking about ultra net worth investors here. We're talking about people with 10 million, 100 million, in most cases $1 billion or more who play in this market. And if interest rates were at almost near zero and you wanted to invest your money, it wasn't worth investing in any type of cash-related asset, meaning any type of safe investment. So what people were doing with their money is, people who had a lot of it, they were looking to diversify. And one area they looked to diversify was the contemporary art market. Now, the contemporary art market has always been more volatile than, say, the modern masters art market. The art market where paintings are selling for hundreds of millions of dollars on a regular basis. For instance, if you have a Monet, if you have a Van Gogh, that's considered a modern master. That's a mega blue chip piece. And the price of that even fluctuates. But if we look at the contemporary art market, that's comprised of artists like Warhol, Banksy. So these particular pieces, they're hot, but they haven't stood the test of time yet. It doesn't mean they're going to go to zero. I want to make that very clear. The contemporary art market is much more volatile than the market for modern masters. And what's happening is, when we look at specific auction companies like Sotheby's, Christie's, and Bonhams that play in this market, they're having a problem getting consigners to sell this stuff, because if the consigner consigns that piece to the market auction house at present time, they don't know what price they're going to get for it. So let's use this as an example. Let's say that they paid $1 million for a painting, and the auction company calls up and says, hey, we would love for you to consign that piece with us. Do you want to? And the person goes, well, how much do you think I'm going to get for it? Well, we really can't guarantee at present time. Doesn't sound so enticing if a person doesn't need money, does it? So what'll happen is, if no one's consigning this stuff to auction and buyers aren't really interested in buying it at ultra high prices right now, it's a vicious cycle that continues. And prices continue to decline as a result. Now, eventually what'll happen, something will happen in the overall economy, prices will come back, and this market will come back roaring. That's why I tell you guys, please do not shed a tear for Sotheby's, Christie's, or Bonhams. They're going to be quite fine. Just look at their consignment ratios. Look at the other items they have up for auction, up for bid. They're doing fine, even without this market booming at present time. So that's what you have to realize about the contemporary art market. It is directly linked to the strength and what is happening in the overall economy, because the people that play in this market are usually people that have massive amounts of money, and they use this as a market to diversify into. Always remember this. Timmy's, Kimmy's, and Poindexters go all in diamond hands on all of these asset classes, whether it's antiques, collectibles, gold, silver, Bitcoin, cryptocurrency, and the like. The billionaire class, they don't do that. If they go all in, they're using private equity to buy the auction company, to buy the art gallery, or to buy their grading company. They're not putting all their money in paintings. They're not putting all their money in Bitcoin. You know, this should be a really big hint to some of you Bitcoin cryptocurrency enthusiasts out there. When Trump got reelected, just right now, 2024, 2025, the first thing that he did was he put out a meme coin. He sold cryptocurrency to the Timmies. He didn't go to the market and start buying Bitcoin. This is something that you guys got to psychoanalyze. If billionaires are trying to sell you cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, why the hell are you buying, dude? It's obviously a Ponzi scheme. It's obviously possibly nothing more than a scam over the long term. And I've been saying that for many, many years on this channel. And people don't want to listen to me because they look at the price and they go, oh, it keeps going up. But there's no underlying cash flows, guys. And if you're going to convince me that, hey, fiat currency is going to collapse and we're all going to be using Bitcoin, I'm already protected because most of my money is sitting in index funds. So guess what? I get paid a quarterly dividend on a lot of those index funds. Well, if fiat currency, the US dollar, goes to zero and those companies are forced in your imaginary world to pay me in Bitcoin, guess what? I automatically get a revenue stream in Bitcoin every 3 months. I don't need to invest in cryptocurrency. See how this works? The finance guys got you beat. That's why I preach this stuff on this channel. Just use common sense in these markets. But don't worry about the contemporary art market. It always goes through boom and bust cycles. It's very predictable. If you're sitting on a Warhol, just in case you're one of my wealthy clients that watches this channel, if you're sitting on a Banksy, you're going to do quite fine as long as you can afford to hold it until the next boom market. It's not going to go to zero. Maybe it's quite possible you can sign to an auction house at the wrong time and you do lose money on it. But overall, you're not going to take a beating on a top-tier contemporary artist. That's pretty much guaranteed to be hot. And the two that I just mentioned, Warhol and Banksy, are two of the hottest artists of our generation. So I do want to make that very clear. Next question. Hi, Sean. Is there any third-party grading company for first edition books? And if not, do you think there should be? In my opinion, no, because book collectors are a unique bunch, and I put myself in this category, so I'm not insulting anyone. Most of us like to hold our books. Most of us like to interact with them in some way. So for book collecting in its purest form, encasing it in a tamper-evident plastic slab with a little letter or numerical grade at the top isn't really something that we would fancy at present time. Now, it could be, remember this, guys, the only constant in the antiques and collectibles trade is change. It could be 10, 20 years down the line, there is a need for this type of grading company, for this type of authentication service that this would provide. And maybe at that point in time, it becomes a thing. But right now, I don't see this as a needed thing. Most of the top tier auction houses, most of the top tier dealers in this market are very, very honest because they want repeat customers. And they also know if they describe a book as being in very fine condition, which for those of you unaware, that is the top tier of the grading scale for collectible first edition books. There is no near mint condition. Very fine is really equal to near mint condition when we talk about book collecting. If somebody's going to describe something like that, they want the customer who gets it, if they look at that book, to go, oh, okay, I agree. This is in very fine condition. I'm happy to have this. I'm happy at the price I paid. I want to put this in my collection. They don't want an unhappy customer who's going to come back and go, hey, you sold me this book. You described it as very fine condition. It's really only in fine condition. Or maybe it's in good condition. You see what I mean? So this market works a little bit different. It's not as nuanced per se as the graded coin marketplace, where back in the day, there were a lot of unethical coin dealers that would advertise everything as being in MS65 Gem Mint. Well, when third-party grading came on the scene, a lot of those coins that were advertised being sold raw in MS65 condition were being sent to PCGS and NGC back in the day, and some of them were coming back AU almost uncirculated 58. Do you know how far down the grading scale AU 58 is from Gem Mint 65? That's a massive overgrading that was taking place back then. And that's why we needed third-party grading. Third-party grading really worked to establish and stabilize the coin marketplace as we know it today. Now, granted, it was manipulated back in the day. You can look this up. I talk about the graded coin bubble in depth that occurred in the mid to late 1980s on this channel. If you want something fun to research, look up the Merrill Lynch Athena Fund, and you'll get a massive education on what happened back then when Wall Street got involved. Believe it or not, companies were sued. People were actually fined by the Federal Trade Commission, which really doesn't happen in the year 2025, unfortunately. And it was a massive scandal. Today, the coin marketplace is in a much better place, not only because of what it went through back then, but also because of the adoption of CAC stickering, Certified Acceptance Corporation. That's a company that was pretty much formed. Now they actually have their own third-party grading wing. But what they used to do is they would look at a coin that was graded by either PCGS or NGC, and if they agreed with the grade, they would sticker it with a green sticker. If they look at the coin and they said, hey, we don't even think this qualifies as the grade, or we don't consider it good enough quality, they would not sticker the coin. So that really made a difference in that market. So I hope that answers your question in full about books, but you still have some more questions here that I want to make sure to answer for you. What's your advice on storing books for the long term? Okay, easiest way to do this, get yourself some acid-free tissue paper. You can buy this on eBay. You can buy this at certain high-end material supply stores. Wrap the book in acid-free tissue paper and simply put it in a airtight, resealable, Sterlite or Rubbermaid container. It could be like the size of a shoebox. If you put it in that, you put some silica gel in there to absorb any moisture, you're good to go. That is perfectly fine to store a book like that. I really don't recommend that people store, or I would say not store, but put on display very expensive first edition books, because the elements can attack the book. And if it falls off the shelf, you can damage the book. If somebody mishandles the book, there's a risk there. So if you are collecting extremely valuable, in your eyes, first edition collectible books, you should be storing them away. They should not be on display. So I hope that helps answer all your questions. That is going to conclude part 2 of the 18,000 subscriber Q&A series. I will do my best to get part 3, upload it to YouTube soon. Please let me know your comments in the comment section below, and I will see you in the next video.